In this video, we will be looking at the payment options that we have in Odoo. These will include certain localizations that we have done particularly for the ANZ market. We'll also be having a brief look at how to create the file for customer direct debits. So getting straight into it, under the accounting app, the first thing I'll go through is how to set up the bank accounts for our customers and vendors. So as an example, if I go to vendors, and let me just pick up a particular vendor in here. If I just look for AA Consulting, under the vendor setup or the customer setup for that matter, under accounting, this is where we'll see what account number has been set up against the particular vendor. So as an example, if I pick up another vendor and try and create a new one, let's say if I just pick up ABC Security in here and I want to create their bank account details, we click on view account details, click on create, and this is where I can input the bank account. Assuming it's ASB bank account that starts with number 12, I can say, and then there is the bank and the branch, and there is the 7-digit account number and a 2 or 3-digit suffix, as they call it, right? So this gives the bank information in here. The account holder's name comes in here automatically, and the other key parts in here are there are 3 fields that goes with our payment information into the bank. They're usually called analysis, particulars, and references. In this is where we will input what information should appear on our bank statement and in the vendor's bank statement. Typically, they will have instructions to say that use your customer ID or use your name or any of those sorts of things. So assuming if I'm going to be using the name in here, my company name is My Company Limited, so I can just come in here and say yes, it's My Company Limited, something like this, and they could have given me a reference number of my customer number is MY001 or 002 or something like that. So that's what I'll put. So these are the 3 fields that are required in here. So once you have created this bank account, you'll notice that it comes into the status of new, which means it still can't be used for payment purposes. It can only be used for payment purposes after it has been authorized. And for it to get into authorize, if I click on authorize, I can't authorize it even though I have the right to authorize. And the reason I can't authorize it because it's created by me. So it has got a 4I policy, as we say, wherein some other person who is a different user to the user who has created the record will be the one who will have to authorize it. So once it's been authorized, then you will be able to use it from a payment perspective. Now, where does this also come into picture? So say, for example, if I go and create a vendor bill. So if I create a vendor bill, and I'll pick up the vendor AA Consulting in this case. So when you're creating a vendor bill, there is a recipient bank option that appears. So by default, it will come up to the topmost record, as all Odoo does in the case when there are multiple bank accounts. So in this case, this vendor has got only one bank account, so it defaults to that bank account. But if at all a vendor has got multiple bank accounts and invoice A goes into one bank account and invoice B has to go to a different bank account, at the time of processing the invoice, you can specify which bank does the payments go into. So just to create a bill in here, typically we need an invoice date and an invoice reference in here of sorts. And of course, in the add line, we put in the note of some expense, what would the GL code be, and some amount in here, right? So this is one part as to how the bank account links into the vendor invoice. This way we can specify which invoice payments will go into which bank, right? Now that we have set this up, that the bank account has been set up, and the same is applicable from a customer perspective as well. So if I go into customers as well, this is only applicable if I'm going to be doing direct debits. So if I go into a customer called Deco Addict, I can come in here, I can set up multiple bank accounts in here. The only difference in here is there is a option in that to be able to send money or to receive money. Because with my customers, I'll not be sending them money. It is going to be EFT file to receive money. I'll usually have them switched off. That's the only small difference in there. Right, going back to our vendors in here. So one other thing that we need to be mindful of in this and that is when we are creating a vendor, there is a field called supplier payment mode. So let me go through what what the payment modes are and how it works. Under configuration, if I scroll down a little bit, I will start off with something called payment methods. So in here I have got the payment methods as inbound or outbound. That means it's coming into my business, or it is a payment going out of my business. And as of now I have got only two options. It's manual and EFT. Manual means I'm either doing a manual check or a cash or any of those sorts of things. EFT means I'll be creating a EFT file format to be able to do a direct debit or to be able to do a direct credit, one of those two, right? So this is what is being set up in here. So at this stage it's EFT, and this is a code. Do not modify that, leave it at EFT because that has been used for certain purposes. In here I can specify whether it is outbound or inbound, and because it is EFT I have put a tick in here to say that bank account is required. Okay, I'll come to payment orders later, right? So now that I've specified the payment methods, the next thing I'll also specify in here is something called payment modes. So I got multiple payment modes in here. So as an example, I could call this payment to my suppliers. If I wanted to create a new one, I can come in here, and I can say my just for the month, for the want of a better word, I'll go with 20th of the month payment run. Cool. So I've given it a name, which company it is applicable for. It is applicable for this company, and this is going to be EFT out file, because out of this process I'm going to be creating at the end of it to a particular bank's EFT format. Then into which bank account is it linked to a fixed bank account, or I can change the bank account every time. By that what I mean is, if I go into fixed, then I can specify from which bank I'll be always using it. Because in most businesses for the 20th of the month payment run, they usually use the same bank account, they don't change it. But if you leave it as variable, then at the time of making the payment you will have the ability to choose the bank. But in this case I'll go with fixed, and I'll go with my Westpac. I'll leave the payment mode for refunds right now because we are not dealing with refunds in the payment in here. And next option in here, what is the default payment execution date? Now what this means is, if I do it, set it to immediately, that means the payment batch is created immediately, and all the journal dates in the system are pretty much immediate in terms of when you process it, even you post it. If I wanted to do, I can do a fixed date, and that's usually my preference. Why I say that is my preference is sometimes the accounts payable person is going to be going on leave on the 20th. So they will not be available on the 20th. So come around the 18th of the month, the last day before they go on leave, they want to be able to process the payment batch and keep the file ready. And so when they are on leave, they can instruct somebody to just upload the file and do the banking sort of things. Whereas from a Odoo sort of things, everything is hunky-dory because they have processed everything, right? So if you put it as a fixed date, then at the time of creating the batch, it will ask you the payment date. So you can input what date the payment needs to happen. So if you're doing it earlier than what is required, you can put in a future date, for example, and all the journals and everything will be dated according to that. Do you want to group transactions in payment orders? I'll say yes, purely because what I want to be able to do is, if a vendor, let's say for example, has got 3 invoices to be paid, I do not want to create 3 records in my EFT file in most cases, because I want them to have one payment which is a total of all the invoices put together. So hence I'll put a tick on the group transactions in payment order. And at this stage I only want to include vendor bills. I can also include credit notes in here. Vendor bills and credit notes pretty much use the same journal, so we don't need to add any more journal in this case. Now the payment mode on invoices, I will leave it at same, and I'll come to explain in a minute what I mean by that. There. So I'll leave that on same, and I only want posted entries. I do not want unposted entries in here, and the selection will be based upon the due date of the invoices. So that's what I'm doing with the due date of the invoices, not necessarily the date of the posting, right? and I want to be able to generate the accounting entries on the file upload, and it is 1 mom per payment date, which is what the entry will be, and I want the accounting entries that are created to be automatically posted. Again, from a bank information perspective, I can specify how many characters to show. I prefer to see the full bank account, and whether we want the bank account from the journals, then we typically don't use this, because I wanted to use the bank account from the bank rather than the journal that I have. So here I have set up a particular payment mode. Now what happens is, if I go back to my vendors in here, and I look at AA Consulting, so under sales and purchases, I have specified in here that this is going to be a credit transfer. So if I want, I can change that to 20th of the month as an example, right? Now we can have multiple of these in here, because some suppliers will be paid according to 20th of the month. You could be paying weekly, and you could have a weekly payment run. So you can define multiple of those payment modes. So when I'm defining the multiple payment modes, I only want the same payment mode, that means 20th of the payment run, to be included when I'm creating the batch for payment, right? And we'll also notice one more thing is, when I'm creating the bills in here and I go create, right? When I choose the vendor in here, the payment mode is also by default selected from the supplier. So if I did want to change this to be the 20th of the payment run instead of this credit transfer to supplier is the default one, you have the ability to do that as well, right? That means this invoice will be taken when any of these others are being selected, and that's the reason that this option is set up to same in here. Okay. Now sometimes what happens is, for the first month, we have not had the opportunity to go and update all the vendors, and I still want to be able to create the file. Yes, you can set this to any, and that means even if the payment mode is blank or not set up correctly, you'll still be able to choose that particular invoice for payment, right? But ideal world, I'll probably say leave it as same, so that it filters out only the where the name of this payment method matches to the invoice's payment mode. That's what we're saying. Right, now what is the process for creating a payments? Right, now there are two ways to create a payment. One is a manual process, which is I can go into payments, I can click on create a new payment, I can choose my vendor, okay, and I can choose the amount I'm paying. Say I'm paying $500 in here. I can choose the type to be paid. Now if I want to be able to create a EFT file, then I need to choose the payment method type as EFT, because I need a EFT file to be created. And this is where I'm sending. Yes, I'm sending money to AA Consulting for $500. So I go confirm, right? And the next thing that I will be doing in here is I will be going to payment matching, and I'll be specifying that this payment belongs to this invoice, and I'm matching the two together in here. Okay. Sorry, misclicked. So yep. So this payment and this invoice, and I go reconcile. So I'm applying $500 to it. Right. And if I wanted to create an EFT file for this one entry, I can click on action and print EFT file, and into which bank I'm paying, and I go print, and that will then create a file in here which gets uploaded into the bank, right? And in a similar way, if I wanted to create multiple manual payments and I wanted to create an EFT file for all those put together, I can come and put a filter in here for the payment date is equal to so and so, and then I can select all. I can select individually in here action, and I can again go print EFT file for which bank it is, and I go print, right? And I'll get a file format in here for those multiple vendors put together in here. So this is when I'm creating the payment manually, and I want an EFT file to be created for them. So this is usually ad hoc process what I've gone through now. The usual process is for a 20th of the payment run. What we do is under vendors, we create something called a payment order. I'll go through that process now. So I go to payment orders, I click on create, right? And what is the payment mode? I'm going to be using this credit transfer to supplier. This one I created as a sample right now, so none of the records are linked to it, and hence I'm not using that. I'm going to be using the payment credit transfer to supplier, which I had set up earlier in there, and that is already set up on the vendors and the invoices that I had in here. So I've got that in here. which bank account, because I said it is fixed, so it's chosen that bank account. I can't change it. Remember, in the option in here I said fixed. If I left it to variable, then I will have the ability to select that. Right, so I've just created this, and the date in here, when is the payment I want to be made. So if I wanted to put a future date, I can put in a future date in here, and that is driven by the date in here immediately, or by the due date, or depending on the fixed date. So that is what this date is in here. So I've created a payment batch. Now I need to choose which vendors and which invoices should be included in this particular batch. And for that, I click on create payment lines from journal items, and I can specify, give me all invoices that are due by a particular date. I'm putting that. I want on vendor bills in here. If I only want to choose certain vendors, then I can come in here and I can go search and more, and I can tick on the vendors by selecting them individually in there. In some cases, what they do is they have a field to identify that these are paid by EFT, so you can come and filter by those particular fields and do a selection as well. But if everything is set up correctly, i.e. those particular vendors have got the payment mode set up correctly in here. So if I go into this vendor as an example, right, and if this payment mode is set up correctly, then technically speaking, when I go into here, you do not have the need to choose those individual vendors, right? So I'll just go back to my due date, and again in here from a partners, and then from a payment mode, you can ideally want to choose the same. You can choose any as well. That means it will include invoices wherein the payment mode is blank or not the same. And I want to be, if there is a outstanding credit note for a particular vendor. So there are invoices and credit notes outstanding. And what I want to do is pay the vendor the net of the invoices minus the credit notes. That means I want to include the credit notes in this payment run as well. So as an example, if there is a supplier who's got an invoice for $1,000 but has a credit note for $200, I want to pay them $800. That being the case, then I'll include the refunds as well, right? I'll have put a ticket. That's why it's there by default. Then when I come in here, I've done my selection filters in here. Click on add move lines. So what this will do is it will go through the system, and based upon the conditions in here as to the due date and my vendor selection and payment selections, it will bring through the transaction. So I can go, yep, I'm happy with it. Click on create transactions. So this brings through the list of invoices that is going to get paid. I can click on partner and sort it and see what it looks like in here. And I'm kind of right now it is in a review process, right? There are 16 invoices in here, and I want to be able to send this for a review. So of course I can come in here and send a message to my boss to say, at so and so person, Joel, can you check this batch? Can you check the payment batch, as an example, right? So Joel gets the detail. Joel can come into here and they can click on review invoices, and they can go through invoices. They can group by the partner, for example, if they wanted to do one partner at a time. And then they can see, right, this is what I'll be paying this partner, this is what I'll be paying this partner, this is what I'll be paying this partner. Alternatively, if they did want to go and they wanted to look at each partner at a time, they can click on it and they can review the bill. So as an example, if I go in here and sort it by partner, if I go into the invoice, I can now review the invoice. If the invoice has an attachment, the attachment will display in the next column in here. So similar to this in here, right? So you can look at the invoice, you can look at the payments, and you can say, yeah, this is okay, I'm happy to pay this. Yes, this is okay, I'm happy to pay this. So you can go through that. If there is anything that you find that you do not want to be paid, you have the ability to come into the payment entry and delete that particular invoice. Either that, or you can put a comment on the invoice and then remove it so that somebody knows why it is not there. Or you can send an email back to the accountant to say, hey, please remove these payments, and they can go and remove them as well. Doesn't really matter. So if there are any exceptions to be done, you can come into here, you can look for that particular invoice under this contact energy. I don't want to pay this. You can hit the delete key in here to remove it, right? And there are other columns you can check in here as well if you want to do. Right, so now I have gone through and I'm happy, and I can see what invoices have to be paid. I'm happy with the list of invoices that need to be paid. I can then click on create. I can then click on confirm payments. Right, so now the payments have been confirmed. What the next step is, I want to create a EFT file for these payments. So I'll come into here, click on generate payment file, and I'm saying it is a normal file, and I can choose which bank it is, and I can go save in here, and that will then create a file in here which I can upload to the bank. Okay. The next step is, once the file has been successfully uploaded, somebody can come into here and they can click on the file successfully uploaded button, and that will then confirm the payments and will create all the journal items that it needs to be created. Now also, as I went through the process, just to go through the process, if I go into payment orders again, just to show you one more thing in here. So if I just go into here, choose that, and this payment execution date, I'm going this date, create a payment file, and anything that is due by end of July, I'm using that, and add more lines. There is a one bill that I deleted from the previous one. Right, what I wanted to show was the workflow in here. You'll notice in the top it is draft, it is confirmed, the file has been generated, and the last step is file has been uploaded. So let's say if we're going through the process and we have come through confirm payments, somebody's reviewed it and they are happy with it, and while they are in here, they said, hey, can you now create the payment file? I'll generate the payment file for that in here, as to what it is, and it's come to this particular stage, and somebody's decided, look, I've changed my mind, I want to start from scratch. So what you have the ability to do is, I can go one step back to reset to confirmed, right? Or I can go, and if I want to make any changes, I can, or I can go through and click on cancel this payment, so that this payment order is marked as completely as cancelled, and I can start a new batch. So the status in here will be cancelled. So I can cancel a halfway through done one without completing it, or I can take it through the entire process of that the file upload has been completed. So this is usually the payment process that you'll be following on the 20th of the month. The other thing I have the ability to do is, I also have the ability to create debit orders. So it's a similar process in here. So in this case, direct debit of customers. Again, the customers, if I have the same process, I can click on create payment from journal items. Exactly the same process you follow. The customers' invoices will come through, and then on the next step will be create the direct debit file, and you upload the file and confirm the file has been uploaded successfully, and that goes through the same process in here to be able to do a direct debit. But majority of my customers, I anticipate, will definitely be using the vendor payment option in here. So that's about the setup in here that is required. Yes, there's just one thing I forgot to mention, which I should have probably mentioned in the beginning, is we do need to be able to set up our bank account as well. So if I go into journals in here, and if I look at my bank account, I have set up the bank account number in here, and this bank account number that you're setting up should also be authorized. Okay, so even just because it is our bank account doesn't mean it bypasses the 4i policy. So any bank account that gets set up needs to be set up by a person and authorized by a different person. So yeah, so you, against the journal, we need to set up the bank account as what the bank account is going to be used, because that is a bank account that we will need in our bank EFT file as well. Hence we need that. Yeah. So yep, so that's the payment process in terms of doing a individual payment in here under payments, or creating a bulk 20th of the month payment run using the payment orders option. Thank you very much.